Hello there. Good evening. Welcome to the Jim Bohannon Show from Westwood One Radio. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Online, find us at jimbohannonshow.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Jimbo Talks. I was going to be talking tonight about one particular part of that tax reform law that has been put into effect, one of the few legislative accomplishments that the Trump administration has been able to get through an often recalcitrant Congress. And we're going to be talking with attorney Jacqueline Newman about this, and in particular, a certain portion of that tax law. Jacqueline, good evening.
Good evening.
Nice to have you on the program tonight. We should note that Jacqueline Newman is a New York-based divorce lawyer. And why would a divorce lawyer want to talk with me about this tax reform law?
Well, the reason we want to talk about it is because it's affecting divorce greatly. And the reason being is that spousal support, what people often refer to as alimony, as of right now, that would be tax deductible to the payor and would be income to the payee. However, if you sign your agreement after December 31st, 2018, when I say agreement, I mean divorce agreement, then it will no longer be tax deductible. So it's going to have a huge impact on divorce going forward.
And I gather that has not escaped any number of people out there who may be approaching the end of the year, not with thoughts of toasting their spouse, but necessarily maybe dumping their spouse. You know, I've been thinking about it anyway. And if I'm going to do it before the first of the year, and at least I won't get caught in a bind on taxes. Is this leading to an explosion of divorces?
It is slowly going that direction, absolutely. I mean, often we'd have people come to our office that aren't sure they want to get divorced or not. They're kind of coming to be educated. And normally I'm a big advocate of don't go through it unless you're sure. Go to marriage counseling, do what you got to do, but make sure that you're you want to get divorced before you move forward with the process. However, now I feel while I still give that advice, I'm saying, however, you might want to make your decision, pretty soon, because if not, you really do want to move forward before the end of the year.
I wonder how many people know about this as you deal with folks who are coming to see you about the possibility of divorce. I wonder how many of them, when they enter your office, had even known about this particular fact.
I think many do not, because it wasn't something that was really highlighted in the tax bill. It was something that obviously divorce attorneys, we were paying a lot of attention to. But I feel like when people were talking about the reform and you read the articles, there really wasn't a whole lot about this. But, yes, it was a big deal in my field, to say the least.
1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, 1-866-505-4626. Currently, and until the end of this year, are alimony payments entirely tax deductible? That is to say, if I pay out, make up a number, $1,000 a month, to make the math easy, as to say $12,000 a year in alimony, that all $12,000 comes off my taxes currently?
Absolutely. It's a top-line deduction, which is why it's so incredibly valuable, because it wasn't like other tax deductions that would be phased out. So
and this is not a phase-out. This is a cold turkey. At December 31st at midnight, that figure goes down to zero, right?
That is absolutely right. And also, in the way that the law is generally structured at this moment, it's not something that's going to expire either. So it's really going to be a question mark as to what ends up happening.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's always, of course, an interesting tale when legislation is told. It's sort of like, I guess, going to the sausage factory. If you eat sausage for breakfast, you don't really want to see how it's put together in the sausage factory. And bills on Capitol Hill, especially tax bills, are a catch-all for every special interest in the book. Now, I would grant that you could probably call divorce attorneys a special interest, and yet I'm not sure that the divorce attorneys as such would necessarily benefit one way or the other here, would you?
No. If anything, it's actually going to make our jobs a lot harder. I mean, one of the things that was really beneficial about paying spousal support was that if you had people that were in two different tax brackets, it was an easier sell. And the people, you saved a lot of more money. There was more money in the marital pot. Now that they're going to be treating spousal support as a non-taxable event, it's going to be treated similarly to the way child support is currently treated. It's there's just going to be less money, and it's not as if the cost of milk goes down. So you're really going to be in a situation where, the payors are going to want to pay less and the payees are going to receive less. It's going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah. Again, I'm just really curious. Whose axe is being ground here? Do you happen to know anything about how this came to be included in this bill? Because often you'll look at a bill, especially a tax bill, and you find some really weird, off-the-wall kind of stuck on like a barnacle provision, and you discover that it benefits a pet project or a company in the district of the subcommittee chairman on widgets and what have you. I'm just curious. Do you happen to know how alimony tax deduction got tossed out of this tax reform bill?
I mean, it's going to be very beneficial to the government because they're going to be the ones that are going to be collecting the money in a way that they didn't previously. I also, as I understand from just speaking to people and kind of talking about how this did happen, I think Catholic groups, the church, they really were, there was a feeling, or at least that was expressed often in some articles that were talking about, there being a divorce benefit to the fact that when you got divorced, you were in a situation that, you got this tax benefit from paying one person to the other. And so whether it was, I can't say for sure, but whether the Catholic Church was, voting on this to make it a little harder to get divorced, or whether it was just clearly the government just wanting more money in their pockets, I don't know. But either way, it's going to make things very difficult.
Most intriguing. In terms of other aspects of this bill, if any, which affect issues like this. For example, you brought up the term child support. Is that affected by this tax reform bill or law?
No. Child support will stay the same. So child support was always a non-taxable event, and it will continue that way. And now it will be somewhat combined with the idea of spousal support because they'll be treated exactly the same.
Yeah. Have you had a serious increase in your business? I'm just curious about how your clientele has changed in terms of total numbers and let's say the composition of your clientele since this became law.
Yeah, there definitely has been more of an increase. I mean, generally we'll have people, usually, I always say there's kind of a season to divorce. And January is a big time that people will come in and want to, just want to get information. They've gone through the holidays, et cetera. But I'm finding now that we're getting really hit this summer where we're getting a lot of people that are coming in because they're hearing about this. And as I said, they were kind of on the fence before, and now they're saying, I really need to get on this because, again, you need to have the agreement signed by the end of the year. And it's also affecting the way we're negotiating even our active cases because the payee is less motivated to necessarily move forward when you have the payor who's willing to enter into agreements that he or she might not have entered into previously but feel now so desperate because they need to get this agreement signed before the end of the year.
Yeah. And this only has to do with its impact on new divorces, I gather. In other words, if you get divorced on December the 31st of this year, then your tax deductions for alimony payments will continue on into the future, decades, however long the divorce decree is in effect, right? Whereas if you get divorced on January 1st, no tax deduction ever, unless somehow the law happens to be changed. So it's not like if I'm let's say currently paying alimony, and I'm currently getting a tax deduction that on January 1st the tax deduction goes away. That would not be the case because that divorce settlement is already in effect, right?
That's correct. And just to be very clear, you don't actually have to be divorced by the end of the year. You just have to sign a separation agreement. So, but yes.
Now that's a critical. That's a key point that I was not aware of. So what you have to sign a separation agreement. The divorce per se does not have to be finalized. If you could explain that in lawyer words so that we all know precisely what we're talking about here. What has to have the ink on the paper dry by midnight on December the 31st? You called it a separation agreement?
Yeah, so a separation agreement, or you can call it a divorce agreement. You basically have to have your agreement set. In this document, you're saying, I'm going to be paying spousal support of this amount for this duration, et cetera. And the problem is that what I think might happen is a lot of people will feel like they want to just settle that part of their case right before the end of the year because they can't settle everything else. But the problem is that spousal support ties very often into the amount of child support you could be paying and into your asset distribution. So what may end up happening is that a lot of bad deals may be struck because you may have somebody that's feeling so desperate just to be able to capture this tax ramification. They want to basically sign that one piece of their case, but not the rest. And it will be interesting to see how people do play it out. But yes, to answer your question specifically, a divorce agreement has to be signed just saying this is what we're paying in spousal support before the end of the year.
All right. To Josh. Josh in La Crosse, Wisconsin on the Jim Bohannon Show with our guest in this portion of the program, New York-based divorce attorney Jacqueline Newman. Good evening, Josh.
Hey, how's it going? I just wanted to give my opinion, and I apologize if maybe that's not what you want. But
well, that's exactly what we want. Go right ahead.
It's slightly off topic, but still related. I just feel like the whole thing about spousal support, whether you call it alimony or I know there's multiple different categorizations or terms that you call it, but it seems a little bit ridiculous to me. I know so many people, usually male in my position, that have a disagreement with their spouse, end up being separated. They want to have full custody of their children and could definitely provide better care than the spouse, and they don't get awarded custody. And my opinion is basically because the spouse is female, and then they have to pay child support and I can't think of the correct terminology, like alimony and or maintenance or something. And it's absolutely ridiculous to me. I think if you get divorced, you should be done. Half of everything you have should be split up, and then that individual should be responsible for finding a job and supporting
assuming,
themselves.
Of course, that individual, let's assume that individual, of course, has the job skills necessary to maintain a certain standard of living. Let's say that you are the spouse of a highly successful surgeon and you're making mega bucks, and you get divorced, and the wife, who is quite hardworking and intelligent in her own right, but does not really possess any particular abilities or skill sets to maintain that lifestyle. I mean, I can easily see, Jacqueline Newman, a case for alimony, certainly in some cases. But to Josh's point directly, do you feel that child support, alimony, and especially custody are granted these days in an atmosphere that is biased against men?
I think that 10 to 12 years ago, I would absolutely say yes. I am seeing a huge shift, and I basically would say in the last 10 years, where a lot of men are walking into my office saying they want 50-50 custody, and they're getting it. So while I would agree that probably if everything was equal and the female wanted custody, she would probably get more. But I'm seeing such a shift, and I would imagine in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a presumption that it's a 50-50 split unless you can prove that it's not in the best interest of the children. So I'm seeing shifts, and I think there'll continue to be shifts. And I also see there's shifts, at least I can speak in New York specifically, there's been shifts in the spousal support law that you're really seeing a lot of the non-money spouses are not getting the same support awards that they used to get at all. So there's been this really large shift, and I think it's just going to continue going in that direction.
All right, more to come. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show with divorce attorney Jacqueline Newman. We're talking about a change in the tax reform law that took effect this year, which in the case of alimony payments will actually kick in the beginning of the new year, namely no more tax deductibility for alimony payments. I think one of the better movies made in the last 40 years, and in fact it's been 39 years, hard as it is to believe, is the movie Kramer versus Kramer, starring Meryl Streep and Dustin Hoffman. It is pretty much about this subject. My guess is, Jacqueline Newman, you've seen that movie at least once.
Yes, I have.
And I'm curious, as a documentary, which of course it was never meant to be, did it accurately reflect the way things were, and does it at all accurately reflect the way things are?
I think it probably did reflect the way things were at that time to some degree. I mean, the shock of that was the way that the father, kind of stepped in a way that wasn't what's traditionally happening at that time. And then the mother, obviously didn't take more of the maternal role that was probably more historical at that time of life. But now I would say, again, I think it really has become very different. I'm seeing many, many more fathers become incredibly involved in the daily task of raising their children, and you just didn't see that as much before. And you're seeing a lot more women who are in the workforce. So obviously, you know, those two things are balancing out, and I see the trend just continuing going that way.
If you had it in your power to be the czar of divorce law in this country, Jacqueline Newman's word was law, what changes would you make in the way we handle divorce and alimony and child support and the like, custody?
Well, that's a great question. I would want to, first of all, I would put back on the tax ability. I would basically still keep things as being tax deductible. But I also would mandate more parenting classes. I would probably take more of a role of people truly understanding what they're about to go through. Because I think a lot of people, you know, enter into divorce, you know, because they have a big fight, and sometimes they don't try as hard as they can. So I would like to see people trying a little bit harder to see if their marriages can work, because you do see a lot of regret, which is sad to see. But again, for me, the biggest thing would be the parenting, and I would want people to take parenting classes. I'd want parents to truly understand what their children are going through and just be able to kind of step out of, you know, the difficulties that they're facing in their own relationships and be able to focus on their children a little bit more.
Yeah. I don't mean this to be at all flippant, but I note the fact that in some states, in fact, in mine when I was growing up, you could get a driver's license at age 16, but at age 15 and a half, you could get what amounted to a learner's permit, and you could drive around with a responsible adult with a driver's license in the front seat. And while I admit that I can't think of the practical application of same, but at times it certainly seems like it would be handy to have a learner's permit for marriage.
You know, I've said that before, and also I would say for parenthood as well. So, yes. I would agree
especially
with that.
for parenthood, yes.
Yeah, I mean, they say, you know, it is important. And I think that, you know, I know certain therapists that do a lot of meetings with people before they get married just to kind of talk about the difficult things and teach them how to communicate well. And, you know, and I always said it would be great if there were some really good parenting classes before everybody gave birth.
It would certainly be the case, as I would thoroughly agree. In terms of divorce overall, I think the conventional cynicism would be that probably we're getting divorced more often and quicker than ever before. Is that true?
Yes. I mean, well, in New York, and actually, and I believe in all states now, there are no-fault divorces, which actually I think is a great thing. But I think before it was just harder to get divorced because you had to prove grounds, and you had to. I mean, in New York, I can just tell you it was very difficult to get divorced, and it was bad because you had to sometimes lie about, you know, your situation in a way that you wouldn't want to, because you had to be able to prove that there was fault. People couldn't just decide they didn't want to be married anymore. Now it is easier to get divorced from that standpoint, which is good because you don't, you know, people do want to part amicably. They should be entitled to do so.
Absolutely. All right. Suffice it to say again, Jacqueline Newman is our guest. Her website, by the way, is nycdivorcelawyer.com. nycdivorcelawyer.com. And we're talking about the new reality and all the changes that took place in our tax code and that new tax law that took effect this year as of December 31st. Alimony for divorces after that point will no longer be tax deductible. Keep it in mind. This is Westwood One.